Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on which part in the world you are in today. First, I would like to thank everybody who was able to attend the session today. My name is Agnes Stoyanov, and on behalf of NNAS, I will be leading today's presentation on starting internationally educated nurses on their journey to practicing nursing in Canada. During today's webinar, we will discuss the following items. We will do an introduction to Canada, followed by an introduction to NNAS. We will do a brief review of the Canadian nursing regulatory bodies and nursing designations. We will do a review of the NNAS application process for both our new Expedited Service as well as the regular service. Later on in the presentation, we will review some tips and strategies to help you successfully complete the NNAS application. And finally, we will give you the chance to ask questions. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. You can enter questions in the question and answer box. Questions will be answered in the last 10 minutes of the webinar. Please do not provide any personal information such as your NNAS ID. You will receive a survey following the webinar to provide feedback. We would like to begin this conversation by first acknowledging that the land on which our head office is located is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. Today, this meeting place is still the home of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We must always remain mindful to not speak in the past tense, as the effects of colonialism are very much current and ongoing. We must be mindful of how we continue to benefit as settlers on Indigenous lands. Canada is the second largest land in the world. It has a population of about 38 million people. As you see in the image of the screen, Canada is made up of 10 provinces and 3 territories to the north. From west to east, these include British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. And on the top of the map, you see the 3 territories, Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. We have a national federal government in Canada, and then each province or territory, in addition, has their own provincial or territorial government. In Canada, healthcare is delivered at the provincial level or the territorial level. This means that each province and each territory have their own healthcare processes. Canada has 2 official languages, English and French. New Brunswick, which is on the east coast, is the only official bilingual province. Quebec is predominantly French. And the 3 territories to the north, they have official indigenous languages in addition to French or English. NNAS was established in 2012 by the federal government of Canada, all the regulatory bodies, and some provincial governments in Canada. This represented a real first in that the regulatory bodies and the governments recognized a Canada-wide approach to this first part of the journey that internationally educated nurses undertake when interested in practicing in Canada. We are a non-for-profit organization. We actually opened our doors in 2014, and I say doors with quotation marks around them because we are a virtual organization. It means that all staff work from home offices across Canada. NNAS is a credentialing service. We provide a consistent approach to collecting, verifying, and storing documents that all nursing regulatory bodies in Canada require, except Quebec and the three territories, Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories. We are the first stop in the journey that internationally educated nurses need to take who would like to practice nursing in Canada. We have been working really hard to improve our processes to issue advisory reports. Between April 1st, 2023 and April 1st, 2024, this is our fiscal year, we issued over 24,000 advisory reports to internationally educated nurses, which is almost 10,000 more than for the previous year. NNAS does not grant licenses to practice, but we do provide the assessment services that will result in a record called advisory report that will be going to the regulatory body in the province that you choose. NNAS does not have a role in making decisions about licenses, nor can it advocate on behalf of any applicants. Only the nursing regulatory bodies have the authority to decide whether an application is successful. The regulatory bodies will review your credentials and all the other information gathered to determine what your next step in the process of getting registered should be. Nursing regulatory bodies in each province set their own registration criteria. Therefore, it is important for all applicants to carefully review the licensing requirements of the regulators where you wish to apply. So I said that for many provinces and cases, NNAS is the first step in your journey to becoming licensed as a nurse in Canada. And the focus of today's webinar will be on the NNAS application process. The purpose of this slide, though, is to show that there are other stakeholders that will be part of your journey, such as nursing regulatory bodies, education bridging programs, employers. NNAS is here to be a resource to help you connect with these stakeholders for questions you may have about their specific roles. Internationally educated nurses wanting to practice in Canada must be registered with the regulatory body in the jurisdiction, this means province or territory, where they plan to practice. And Canada has 26 of them. I know, that's a lot. With some provinces having more than one nursing regulatory body, and we will review very shortly why this is the case. Each regulatory body is separate from one another, even in provinces with more than one nursing regulatory body. When an internationally educated nurse starts the application process, first they need to decide in which Canadian province they want to live and work, because this will truly determine everything else. Each regulator has their own unique processes and registration requirements. Unlike other countries, Canada does not have one national regulatory system. Rather, each province and each regulator has their own unique regulatory systems and licensing processes. And these are all the provincial regulatory bodies that are members of the NNAS, and where, after you have completed the NNAS process, your advisory report will go. Your credentials will be reviewed, and the decisions will be made on what your next step in the process of getting licensed would be. All the nursing regulatory bodies except Quebec and the three territories to the north are members of the NNAS and accept our advisory reports. In Canada, there are three different nursing professions. We are responsible for doing assessments of the education and credentials of all three occupations. The first is a registered nurse, and registered nurses are in place across Canada. The next are the licensed practical nurses, called in some provinces registered practical nurses. And they are also a regulated profession in all provinces and territories. It is important to know that in Ontario and Quebec, licensed practical nurses are termed registered practical nurses. And the last nursing profession that we have is the registered psychiatric nurses. And this profession is only available in the western part of Canada. So the provinces actually license psychiatric nurses are Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia. It does not mean that you cannot practice in that setting if you are a registered nurse. You just need to have that specialized kind of education in those four provinces to get registered as a psychiatric nurse. Becoming a registered nurse in Canada usually requires a 4-year university program that leads to a nursing degree. The program includes theory and clinical instruction in medical and surgical nursing. A registered nurse is a generalist nurse with the skills to work in all settings and with all types of patients. Becoming a licensed practical nurse usually requires a 2 to 3 year college program that leads to a nursing diploma. Training includes theory and clinical instruction in medical and surgical nursing. A licensed practical nurse is a generalist nurse with the skills to work with all types of patients, although their scope of practice is more limited compared to that of a registered nurse. Registered psychiatric nursing is a regulated profession in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. In these provinces, becoming a registered psychiatric nurse usually requires between 2.5 to 4 years of nursing education at the college or university level. Registered psychiatric nursing programs include theoretical and clinical training in psychiatric and general nursing. And you can learn more about the three nursing professions in Canada on our website under Discover Nursing in Canada. This slide shows where on the website to look for this information. Here we have shown the general wages range for registered nurses across Canada. This is a Government of Canada website on which one can check similarly the wage ranges for licensed practical nurses and registered psychiatric nurses, as well as other professions, by the way. It's not only limited to healthcare. This website also has information on job prospects and available positions. As you see, the breakdown is provided by province, and then you can click on each separate province on the actual website to see a further breakdown per region and per city. Let's look at the application process now. NNAS currently has 2 application processes for internationally educated nurses. The Expedited Service, which we still call new, but it's not so new anymore because it was launched a whole year ago, and the regular service. Both are based on requirements that meet the needs of nursing regulatory bodies in Canada as part of the first steps of becoming licensed or registered as a nurse in Canada. NNAS is the only organization that provides internationally educated nurses with access to all nursing regulatory bodies, except Quebec, Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories. The new service, new in inverted commas, launched in the end of June 2023 and was the result of several years of consultation with regulatory bodies, governments, internationally educated nurses themselves, and various other stakeholders like education bridging programs. The goal was to listen and learn from these stakeholders with the purpose of removing barriers so that the NNAS process can be completed in a faster and smooth way while still maintaining that public safety element, which is so important. It launched in the end of June 2023, as I mentioned, with participating regulatory bodies and is specifically for internationally educated nurses looking for licensing either as registered nurses or as licensed practical nurses. Basically, what happens is it is based on a streamlined set of documents, and due to the faster review of those, we are able to issue advisory reports within 5 business days, which is a lot quicker than our regular process. Under the regular process, it takes about 12 weeks to issue advisory reports. It is offered for the fee of 750 Canadian dollars. This is about 550 US for the expedited service application. When someone pays the 750 Canadian dollars, they can select multiple regulatory bodies that are participating in the expedited service at no additional cost. And this is the best feature of this service. You select as many regulators participating in this service as you want for that one cost, which can be a significant saving element for applicants. For comparison, the regular process is 650 Canadian dollars, and you pay additionally for each regulatory body that you want to add. Now let's look at the regular service. The regular service has been in place for nearly 10 years. It is offered in partnership with participating regulatory bodies that choose to stay in the regular service. It is offered for all 3 designations: RNs, LPNs, and registered psychiatric nurses. Under this service, additional documentation is required compared to the expedited service. And once all documents are received, the advisory report is released within 12 weeks. The fee is 650 US dollars. This is about 880 Canadian. As mentioned, additional nursing professions and additional nursing regulatory bodies can be added, but for additional fees. For example, the evaluation of an additional nursing profession is 220 US dollars if the application has not been closed. This is about 300 Canadian. And an advisory report to be forwarded to an additional regulatory body is 55 US dollars. This is about 75 Canadian. Let's look who is eligible to apply. In order to be eligible to apply for reader service, the applicant needs to have completed and graduated from a post-secondary nursing education program outside of Canada. Not physician, not dentist, not assistant nursing, but nursing education program. This table lists the participating regulatory bodies in each service respectively. It is the regulatory body's decision whether they want to join the expedited service or remain in the regular process. We continue to work with other nursing regulatory bodies to hopefully have more come into the expedited service. Now we will walk you through the NNAS application and the 4 easy steps you need to complete during the process. When an applicant wants to begin the NNAS application, it doesn't matter whether they are applying under the regular service or the expedited service. The very first thing to do will always be to go to this Apply Login button link from the NNAS homepage and create an account. As part of the process, you will be asked to provide an email address, answer 3 security questions, read and agree to the terms and conditions. Next, you will select which province or provinces you wish to apply to. You will see a list of regulatory bodies participating in both the regular service and expedited service. After completing the personal information section, you will be asked to provide a credit card for payment information. Visa or MasterCards are accepted. Debit cards are not accepted because our system cannot work with them. You will receive a welcome email with your NNAS identification number between 24 to 48 hours after your payment has been made and accepted. While completing the information on the application form, it will say that the applicant needs to disclose all information fully. If there is anything incomplete or fraudulent information is provided, the application may be delayed. The applicant has 12 months to get all the required documents submitted. If somebody started their NNAS application before we introduced the expedited service and are applying to one of the regulatory bodies that is now participating in it, the application is automatically transferred to the expedited service. The applicant doesn't need to do anything. Depending on where they were in the process, the portal would have been adjusted and only the required documents under the expedited service will be demanded. This slide, as well as the next few slides, shows screenshots of what the NNAS online application looks like. This particular slide illustrates that the very first thing applicants select is for which regulatory body in which Canadian province you wish to apply. Personal information is the very first thing you enter when you complete your NNAS application form. This screenshot illustrates that applicants provide information on where they completed their nursing education. This screen shows that the system will assign you an NNAS ID number and an application number. The application number is different for each application submitted, whereas the NNAS ID number is unique. That is your unique identifier. In Part C of the application form, applicants answer the question if they have passed the NCLEX exam, which is the mandatory exam for registered nurses wishing to practice in Canada. And then the applicants provide information on registration, where they were registered to practice. This section is about your employment as a nurse. It will include information about where you have worked and the hours you have worked in the last 5 years preceding your application. This slide illustrates the terms and conditions that applicants have to agree to. And let's look at the required documents now. This slide compares the required documents in both the expedited service and the regular service. Under both services, applicants are required to submit 2 forms of notarized ID, and they can now upload those directly into the applicant portal themselves. For education in the expedited service, a course-by-course assessment report is what the regulators require. There are 2 different education assessment reports. There is the assessment report that is only 1 page, and it is only required for immigration to Canada. So many who have already applied for immigration to Canada and have gone through WES, for example, already possess this 1-page report. But then there is the more detailed course-by-course report that is often required by regulatory bodies or professional licensing bodies in Canada. And our nursing regulatory bodies require this more detailed course-by-course report, which means it already comprises the 1-page information, but it also includes the educational transcript, the GPA, and the credit hours for the program. So, for example, if somebody already possesses the simpler 1-page report, they can request an upgrade to the more detailed course-to-course report. That must come from one of the official entities that are approved by IRCC to do the course-by-course assessment reports. Please note that applicants are required to pay the fees to obtain the course-by-course reports. They are about 200 to 250 Canadian dollars, and they vary by each organization. We recognize that there will be existing applicants who already submitted a request to have their educational transcripts sent to NNSA by the university, for example. And if this is the case, the regulators have agreed that they will accept those educational transcripts. We will not require existing applicants who already sent transcripts from the educational institution to also be getting the education assessment report. It is a bit like a grandfathering process. Applicants who have already had their educational credentials submitted will just not need to repeat this step. For education requirements under the regular service, regulators ask the educational institutions of applicants to complete the nursing education form, to send the official transcript along with the form, and the syllabus, or the course description, also called curriculum in some countries. It is important to note that the full syllabus or the full course description is only required in the regular service, and it is not needed under the expedited service. For licensing requirements, in the expedited service, applicants need to submit their first and current nursing registration. If their current nursing registration is different from the first, they will be submitting two. They will have two separate documents to submit. If there has been a change, if their first and current registration is the same license, then there is just one to be submitted. That document needs to come directly from the registration or the licensing body. Applicant cannot submit it themselves. So that is why we call it a third-party documentation. The applicant has to request that from the International Nursing Regulatory Body, and the latter sends it directly to the NNAS. For licensing requirements under the regular service, documentation for all nursing licenses must be submitted directly to the NNAS by the official regulatory body or organization, regardless of how long ago those licenses were held, and regardless if they have expired or if they were ever used for practice. And the last point, employment. For employment in the expedited service, no documentation is required, but applicants will be asked to disclose employment information on the application form directly. For employment under the regular service, employers in the last 5 years are required to fill in the employment form and send it back directly to NNAS. This is known to take a lot of time, so reach out to your past employers well in advance and ensure that they are able to complete the necessary form. We have been asked a number of times, how is the curriculum assessed under the expedited service? So as part of the efforts to make the process easier and more straightforward, NNAS has introduced a new way to review credentials, nursing educational credentials, and this new way saves applicants both time and money. Rather than requiring that the curriculum be submitted and reviewed for each individual applicant for each individual educational institution, NNAS now reviews the curriculum on a country level. So we review international curriculums in depth still, but at a country level. The educational reviews are still completed by nursing experts who are familiar with the entry to practice requirements in Canada. They are also familiar with the internationally educated nurses and the value they bring to Canada. The regulators who join the expedited service understand and know very well the new educational review process, and they accept it. They use the country-level curriculums that we provide them with, along with information in the NNAS advisory reports, to make their licensing decisions for next steps of each separate applicant applying to them. This information on the slide here concerns only applicants for Ontario. As of February 9, 2023, NNAS is releasing advisory reports without requiring a curriculum assessment to applicants who have already written and passed the National Counseling Licensure Examination for registered nurses, and if they have passed the exam on or after April 1st, 2013. In other words, if you have passed the exam already, you will not need to submit the curriculum for assessment if you are applying for Ontario to the College of Nurses of Ontario. Applicants can update this information on their NNAS application form directly, and then NNAS verifies with the examination board that the exam was successfully passed. Applicants will be able to monitor the status of their application through the application portal, monitor when documents are received by NNAS and the status of your application as it moves through the process. Some common stages you will see on the applicant portal are waiting for required documents. This means that NNAS is waiting to receive all required documents from you or third parties. Ready for review. All required documents have been received, and an evaluator will be assigned to review your application for completeness before they begin the review of the documents. Ready for final review means that your application is in the final stage of the review and is undergoing a quality assurance check. Report issued means that you have completed the NNAS process and your advisory report is complete and available. So once all documents are collected, this is when NNAS reviews all the documentation, provided there are no issues and no further clarifications required. The advisory report will be issued within 5 business days of all documents being received for the expedited service or within 12 weeks for the regular service. The advisory report will automatically be sent to the regulatory body you have selected. It will include all the documents submitted to NNAS by the applicants themselves and by third parties, as well as correspondence that you have had with NNAS. Applicants can download a copy of the advisory report and apply to the regulatory body of their choice, but NNAS is sharing the report with the regulatory body automatically as well. This slide illustrates a sample application with the status of waiting for required documents, just to show you what it looks like. You see the status highlighted in yellow to the right. This slide shows a summary of our sample application. It shows what has been sent and what documents are still pending. And these are just some tips and strategies for going through the application process as smoothly as possible. In terms of when the NNAS assessment process should be started, it can be done before or at the same time when you start your application for immigration to Canada. We have an applicant handbook, which is a very detailed guide for the process that all applicants are invited to read. You are responsible for disclosing all the information requested and for arranging the third parties to send the documentation to the NNAS for the process. This requires a regular follow-up by the applicant, in many cases, particularly with third parties such as previous employers, education institutions, licensing bodies. All documentation must be submitted in English or French. Monitoring the progress of one's application proactively will assure timely interaction if any follow-up is required with NNAS or with third-party providers. We highly recommend that applicants focus on the province where they will be living and working because each regulatory body has unique processes and requirements. We recommend that you explore the website of the regulatory body where you will be applying. On one hand, to learn about the specific registration process and the requirements of that particular regulatory body. And on the other hand, to also become familiar with any additional fees related to becoming licensed, such as registration fees, jurisprudence exam fees, if applicable, language proficiency requirements and fees, bridging programs, if applicable, national exam fees. Always reach out to NNAS directly for questions about your application process. There can be a lot of misinformation out there, so always reach out to NNAS first. NNAS will only communicate with the applicant directly about their particular situation. We will not provide information to other third parties unless the applicant has given us specific permission to do so. Explore the range of free settlement services available to support newcomers, from language training and job assistance to community integration programs and legal aid. This page contains useful information to help newcomers become more informed about the assistance that they can expect to get when moving to Canada. Some internationally educated nurses may choose to use an immigration consultant to support their journey to coming in Canada. In Canada, immigration consultant is a regulated profession, just like nurses. We encourage you to visit the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants to learn more and to find credible immigration consultant. You can also seek support from other organizations such as Care for Nurses, for internationally educated nurses. CARE offers multiple programs at no cost for internationally educated nurses looking to practice in Canada. If you need financial assistance with covering costs associated to the licensing and immigration process, you can search for information on microloans available to internationally trained professionals. And we list two of them here. The Atlantic Immigrant Career Loan Fund is a microloan fund for internationally trained immigrants in Atlantic Canada. They provide microloans to newcomers to allow them to overcome financial barriers, to upgrade their skills, and to obtain their license or certification. By the way, this organization will host a webinar for NNAS shortly, I believe in the month of November, and I believe it is November 4th off the top of my head. You can check on the NNAS website under news for upcoming webinars, and the date will be listed there. If you wish to sign up to attend the Atlantic Immigrant Career Loan Fund, you're welcome to register for that webinar. And the second one listed here is Windmill Microlending. It's also a registered Canadian charity supported by the Government of Canada that offers skilled immigrants low-interest microloans to cover the various costs of returning to their profession in Canada. Applicants must be residing in Canada and hold permanent resident or provincial nominee or refugee status, or to have received Canadian citizenship to use the services. Many provincial governments now offer internationally educated nurses navigation services. We recommend that you visit the website of the provincial government applicable to you to see if there are any other financial bursaries or other incentives available to you. You don't need to take notes. This webinar will be uploaded online, and you can revisit any page of the webinar whenever you want to get back to the information. So this slide lists the provincial governments and the respective websites and services that they offer. And we would like to show you several screenshots of our newly launched website. In the month of July, NNAS launched a revised version of its website, although I should better say that it's completely new rather than a revision. This is our homepage. This is our new current homepage from which you can navigate to find all other information. This screenshot lists our also newly launched Readiness to Apply tool. This tool is to help applicants understand better if they're ready to begin the process, what documentation will be required for the process, what choices they will have to make in terms of which profession they are applying for, which province or provinces they will be applying for. So applicants will answer a number of set questions, and based on the questions and how they answer, the Readiness to Apply tool will generate a personalized report that will be made available to the applicant. I mentioned our news page for upcoming events and webinars. So from the home page, if you go to News and Resources, you will be able to visit the page that lists all upcoming events and webinars. In the very first column here, you see the one we are conducting right now on August 29th. The next webinar, identical to the one we are holding at the moment, will be on September 30th in the evening. Just for people whose time difference with Canada does not allow that they attend a morning webinar, we'll be having one in the evening so they can ask their own questions. Oh, and I was right about November 4th. So see, the applicant webinar for the Atlantic Immigrant Career Law Fund is indeed on November 4th. And it is at 9 a.m. Canada Eastern Time as well. So on this page, we always publish all upcoming webinars. On our new website, you will also be able to see a set of videos. These are interviews with internationally educated nurses who are already in Canada and practicing, who already went through the process, so they can share their experience and their impressions from the process. This on the slide screen here shows just 4 of the videos, but they're a bit more. I think they're 6 or a bit more than that. This slide shows the NNAS website links for information on both the Expedited Service and the regular one, as well as the applicant handbook available in English and French. We have 2 ways that applicants can contact us. There is the applicant support email address for written inquiries and the toll-free line. This is the first point of contact for applicants if they have questions about NNAS or the application process, questions about document submission or the report status. This email and the toll-free phone line will connect applicants with the applicant support at our service provider, CGFNS. They are the ones that can access your application and that have full access to all applicant information. And then there is the applicant navigator inbox. If after applicants have contacted support and they still have barriers, they still need some additional help, you can reach out to the applicant navigator email address, and the applicant navigators at NNAS will be here to support you. And now we will give some time to ask questions. We will do our best to answer. If we do get a question of which do not know the answer at that time, we would acknowledge that we do not have the answer at the moment, and we can do research to provide additional feedback at a later date. I also want to reiterate that you can use the email address that you saw on the previous screen to send questions by email. If any question that you have is pertaining to your particular and specific personal information and personal circumstances, then we encourage you to reach out in person rather than disclosing personal information in the audience of everybody. And we will be pleased to answer by email to anyone who reaches out to us with questions. Kyle, I'm not sure if Tavia is successfully joined to ask questions, or do I
I'm
need
here.
to go to the... Okay,
Yeah,
Tavia, do you have access to the question box? Are we getting any questions?
I do, and we do have some questions.
Okay.
So our first question is, what if someone hasn't written the NCLEX yet?
Most people would not have written the NCLEX yet, actually, because it's only required for practice in several countries in the world. And the two that I know of are Canada and the USA. So, frankly, the only scenarios I have come across so far are people pass the NCLEX exam already if they were applying to practice in a USA state and the exam was a requirement for practice there. But for most people who are applying for Canada for the first time, they wouldn't have passed the NCLEX exam because you actually need permission to write the exam. And this permission can be granted by a regulatory body in a Canadian province or in a United States of America state. So you need permission to be accepted to write the exam. Don't worry if you have not written the exam yet before starting your NNAS application. This is the case for the majority of applicants for the simple reason that you need permission from a regulator that is participating in order to take the exam.
And so if an applicant was applying to, say, CNO and they already passed the NCLEX in the United States, their educational curriculum would be waived, requirement would be
It will,
waived.
yes, it will be waived. It will not be requirement for submission. Just the educational form and the transcripts will be asked by the CNO.
Uh,
And licensed practical nurses, they have a different exam. They write their own exam, and applicants also need permission from a regulator to sit for the exam.
right. Um, so with the language requirements, if someone was educated in the UK, would they still need to pass the language requirements for English?
The language requirements are not conducted by the NNSA anymore. They used to be in the past, and now each regulator has taken over. So this is done at the provincial level. But honestly, most regulators, if not all regulators, have a number of different ways to meet the language requirements. They do accept tests such as the IELTS or the TOEFL exams, but they also have other ways of proving language proficiency, such as proof for attending college or university in English in a country where English is the language of education, and some other additional, by the way, also exist. So check directly on the website of the regulatory body to which you are applying to see what are all the ways in which you can prove language proficiency.
Okay, let me just see here. Sorry, they're just coming in really quickly. Uh, what if someone had submitted the wrong document?
That has happened, of course. Human error can happen. As soon as you become aware that you have submitted a wrong document or something is not quite right with the document submission, inform us as soon as possible so the delays will be small. We'll work with the situation based on the personal circumstances and what the situation is to rectify.
If someone passed the NCLEX, I would say like in the 80s or 90s, would that still be valid?
Well, that is a very interesting question because the curriculum is waived only if you passed after 2013. But if you passed in the 90s or 90s, um, I am not entirely sure. I would need to look into that. I do not want to answer by heart and provide the wrong answer because
I,
if I answer right now, I will be making an educated guess.
I think that in that case, I think with a that would also be probably a question for the regulatory bodies because I think they'd have to make the executive decision on that one.
Yes, it may be something that is reviewed on one-to-one basis for each particular case because that scenario will be very rare, right? If you passed in the 80s, you would have passed because you worked in Canada before, but then you wouldn't be applying to the NNAS, or because you practiced in the US. So that's an unlikely scenario, but an interesting question for me to check on.
Yeah, that one's interesting. After verification, can one apply for a job directly if they're still outside of Canada?
After completing the NNAS process,
Just says verification, so I don't know
after
if that would be.
verification. So NNAS collects and verifies the documents needed for the process. Then these documents are sent to the regulator, the regulatory body in the province of your choice. and you would need the province to issue your license to practice in order to apply for a job in Canada. So you need in the very minimum a provisional license, and a provisional license can be given most often if the application is successful and contains all required documents, but the person is waiting to write their exam. They're registered to write the exam, they're just waiting for the exam to take place. In this scenario, many provinces give a provisional license just for several months to practice while you're waiting to take the exam, but you need a license in order to practice. So just the verification of the documents itself is not sufficient. You can practice after you have successfully registered with the Canadian Nursing Regulatory Body. And mind you, in order to accept your application for successful registration, all the Canadian nursing regulatory bodies will also require proof of having the right to live and work in Canada. So, in order to have the right to legally live and work in Canada in any occupation, you need to have completed the immigration procedure and hold a permanent residence status, or you need a work visa. And only then they will allow to a license to be granted. So once you have a license, you can look for jobs because and a requirement to get the license will be to have the legal status to live and work in Canada.
How long does it take NNAS to update the applicant profiles once documents have been received?
5 business days is the requirement for any new mail delivered to see updates on the profiles online, but you can always reach out to the support team to notify them that the document has been received and ask for them to when you will be able to see the update.
Could a head nurse fill out the employment form instead of HR or the chief nurse?
The NNAS employment form?
Yes, so probably for the regular process.
A head nurse instead of what, Davia?
Instead of like the chief nurse or like the HR personnel.
I'm afraid I do not know the difference between a chief nurse and a head nurse. These sound to be the same thing to me.
I wonder if
Um,
this case this would be like a supervisor opposed to like
Usually it's a supervisor or a manager in the department. Hazarding a guess, I would say yes, that a head nurse can fill the form. But again, this is a question that I would like to check with the third party evaluator, CGFNS, just to make sure that I'm giving the correct information. Please send me an email, the attendee, the webinar attendee with this question, send me an email so I can check and send you a verified answer.
Okay, let me see here. So for actually, I'll answer these two because I have two questions here about the Alberta pilot.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the Alberta pilot, there's been a couple questions asking if you can transfer your application for the Alberta pilot to either the regular expedited process, and the answer to that one would be no, because the Alberta pilot application was specifically designed and paid for by the province of Alberta. So you would have to apply and pay for an application for either expedited or regular process, depending on which regulatory body you're looking to apply to. However, any documentation that was provided for the Alberta pilot, so like notarized documentation that is still valid or any academic documents, can most likely be transferred over to a new application. And then you would just have to provide the remaining requirements for the other processes. And the support team can assist you with that. I think we have time for about maybe one or two more questions. Does NNAS help with networking or job hunting?
With job hunting, no, we have nothing to do with the employers. Employers advertise available positions themselves on their own websites. They have their own hiring processes. In some provinces, this is even happening on a provincial level, meaning that you are applying to the they are divided in the so-called healthcare authorities. For example, British Columbia, it has between 5 and 7 healthcare authorities, and you submit a job application directly to the healthcare authority of the area where you are interested in practicing. Uh, with networking, well, we are here to help you connect with other stakeholders that can help lead to job or job resources. We mentioned during the presentation that Canada has a myriad of settlements services. These are agencies that provide services to new immigrants free of charge, and they can direct immigrants to where to look for jobs, how to look for jobs, get the skills to be job ready, how to make a Canadian style resume, how to prepare for a Canadian style interview. So even though we do not directly help with job hunting, we're here to connect you to resources that will assist with the job search.
Great. And at this time, are there still no psychiatric regulatory bodies participating in the expedite process?
Now, at the moment, psychiatric regulatory bodies are all under the regular service. Related to the previous question about job hunting, I want to mention that in Canada, there is some called job fairs, and they're very popular. Applicants can attend a job fair that is for healthcare occupations or a job fair that is specific to nursing only, where they will be able to meet with settlement agencies, employees, and employers.
And
You
I
can
can see.
Google upcoming job fairs, healthcare job fairs Canada, or nursing job fair Canada to see where and when are any upcoming ones in the near future. The last time I was searching for Ontario, I saw at least 3 or 4 in the coming 2 or 3 months in Ontario, and they were all in the south of Ontario. Toronto, Sarnia, Windsor, like all of them were to the south part of Ontario. But it is enough to Google job fair nursing Ontario, and you will be able to find where you can meet prospective employers.
Okay. So it is 10. So that would, I think that will be our last question.
Thank you, Tavia. Thank you, everybody who was able to attend today. And just to remind you, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website if you want to go back to it to revisit any part of the information.
And just as a final reminder that for individuals who provided an email and had asked a question, we will get back to you as soon as we're able to finish answering your questions in the Q&A.
Thank you.